Okay, so today we're talking about diet and MS, multiple sclerosis. I've got Jady with me. Jady Lamb is a MS dietitian and exercise physiologist. So I work with Jady, but Jady, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at MS?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Thanks for having me today. I'm really passionate about being able to share a little bit of information. So hopefully, all of you are able to gain something out from today's session. A little bit about me. I started working at MS as an exercise physiologist almost 4 years ago. Since October last year, I've been involved in setting up and running the new dietitian service, which is incredibly exciting. So yes, that's a little bit about me.
Great, and so let's get straight into it and maybe start with what the research says about diet and MS. So I guess should people living with MS be following the Australian Dietary Guidelines?
Yeah, it is a very common question, and most research into diet and MS, unfortunately, have largely been observational or small studies. So, therefore, there isn't a lot of evidence to recommend any special diets for people with MS, and there's a lot of research that's needed in the area to actually determine whether or not these special diets might be safe as well. The best recommendations at this point in time for individuals with MS is to follow the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So, what the guidelines state essentially is number one, enjoy a wide range of nutrition foods from the five food groups. So, chances are a lot of you might have heard about the five food groups. So, we've got plenty of vegetables of different types, different colors. We've got the different types of fruit as well. We've also got things like cereals and grains, preferably the whole grain varieties or the high fiber varieties. And this may include things like your bread, your cereals, your rice, noodles, pastas, even things like polenta, couscous, oats, quinoa, and barley included in this category. We also have things like lean meats and also meat alternatives as well. So this might include things like your poultry, your fish, nuts and seeds, legumes, lentils. And we also have things like low fat dairy, so things like milk, yogurt, cheeses, and their alternatives, as well as drinking plenty of water. The second recommendations we take from the guidelines are limiting intake of foods which might be high in saturated fat. So these are the fats which aren't very good for us. Things like added salt, things like added sugars, and also alcohol. So what that means is limiting things like biscuits, your cakes, your pastries, your pies, things like processed meats, burgers, chips, pizzas, all the yummy foods that we generally
Yeah.
have, and replacing some of these foods which might be high in saturated fats with things like butter, cream, and things like cooking margarine, which are low fat, which are a bit more plant based, and containing predominantly of the better fats like the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats. And this may include things like oil spreads, nut butters, paste, things like avocado as well. Fish also falls under this category. The next thing is also limiting food and drinks which might have added salt. So, how we do this is by reading labels, choosing things which might be low in sodium compared to other foods within a similar category, and not adding salt to cooking within our food. And the last one is limiting things like sugar, particularly in our foods and also our drinks. So, a lot of our soft drinks, sugar, sweetened drinks, cordial, fruit drinks, all fall within this category. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit about the Australian Dietary Guidelines.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And I guess then probably the next question could be how could someone start to build healthy habits around their eating and nutrition?
Yeah, and I think now is a really good time that we've celebrated all the holiday seasons, all the special events. So, in terms of building habits, there's a couple of ways I think about it. There's a few steps. So, first of all, I think about increasing awareness of what we are currently doing as well, and that's by maybe keeping a food and drink diary. So, this will give us a bit of an idea what we might be having throughout the day, and then as we sort of think about what we are having to eat and drink, we sort of become a bit aware of what sort of habits we might be having as well. So some of these habits we might commonly have might be things like skipping meals, or we might be eating due to stress or boredom as well. And then once we've identified these habits, we could probably sit back and think about, okay, why are these things happening? What are the sort of triggers or the cues for these habits as well?
Mm.
So once we're sort of aware of what's going on, we sort of reflect on, is there anything we can actually do? to avoid these things from happening. So, for example, would TV be a trigger for eating snacks, for example? Or if you've got a busy day, would that be the trigger for forgetting to eat our meals? Think about if it's something that we can actually modify. Can we sort of maybe change the things that we do with our hands when we're watching TV? Or can we sort of schedule regular breaks throughout the day, just to sort of make sure that we've got some food? And then once we sort of think of what we can actually modify, we try to replace some of these habits with some new healthy habits. So for example, meal planning, having certain not having certain foods at home, which means we can't snack on these foods. And also keeping in mind that habits do take time to develop as well. So celebrate when we achieve these new habits, but also be kind when we do fall off track, because these things happen. Lots of things do happen in our lives, which do make some of these lifestyle changes really hard to do. So it is okay to fall off track, but just know when that happens, take it as a positive experience. It is a learning experience for us to actually go back and think about, okay, exactly what happened then? Is it something that we can actually do to change it for next time it does happen? And the more often it happens, the more obstacles that come up, and the more often we overcome it, and the faster we get to it, better we'll feel, and the better we become at it, and becomes a new habit. We don't actually think about it anymore. So, example might be we might tend to skip meals. This might be because we forget to eat due to a busy day. So, some of the strategies will be, can we have a meal prepared beforehand? Maybe setting up a time to eat, and start doing that maybe once a week, and then progressing to doing it for the rest of the week, and eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, no, it sounds great, Jady. Thank you. And I guess then talking about goals as well, with a goal to eat a healthy, balanced diet, a lot of people often have a goal to regularly exercise as well. And I think as a dietitian and an exercise physiologist, what would be your recommendations for a client that wanted to implement multiple goals at once?
Yeah. And I suppose one of the things that I start off with is recommending something called SMART goals, which I think a lot of us might have heard of before. So, setting goals which are specific, so we know exactly what we want to do. Setting goals which are also measurable, so we can actually measure it, we can hold ourselves accountable in terms of whether or not we can or can't achieve these goals. Making sure they are attainable as well. So, making sure we've got the tools, the time, the resources to achieve this particular goal, making it realistic. So sometimes small goals and sometimes achievable goals are quite beneficial, and also making sure the goals are also time bound as well. So we know when it starts, how often we're going to do this, and potentially where it might end as well. So an example of a diet and exercise one might be, for example, I'm starting today, I would eat half a plate of vegetables at dinner 5 days a week. So it's quite specific. We know what we're measuring. It's something which sounds reasonable, realistic to do, and we've got a time frame to it. We know how frequently we want to do it. We know we want to do it starting today. An example of an exercise what might be, starting today, I'll do 10 minutes of exercise 5 days a week, and so forth. And once we've created our SMART goals, when we know what we want to do, pick on a few things you want to work on. It's okay to do maybe one or two goals at a time, maybe one for exercise, one for diet. And as you get better and as you've achieved the goals, then we start working down the list. Sometimes when we've got too many things that we want to change, we get quite overwhelmed, and we may find it really hard to get started. Whereas I think if we keep it simple, keep it easy, then it's quite motivational when we achieve one goal. It makes us excited and motivated to actually achieve the further goals down the track as well.
Yeah, that sounds good, Jady. So I guess another one would be, many of our clients do experience fatigue as a symptom of their MS. So what could be some strategies on how to manage fatigue?
Yeah. I would say some strategies from a diet perspective is having regular meals over the day, and that gives us energy to use throughout the day. The next thing is we can select low GI whole grains. So I'm talking about the whole grains, breads, rice, noodles, pastas, and those are the types of foods which provide energy for our body. But the low GI component of it means that these foods are broken down by our body quite slowly. So the energy is actually released quite slowly into our bloodstream. So it gives us longer lasting energy and also makes us feel fuller for longer. The last thing I usually say is maybe check the iron levels as well, more because one of the most common symptoms of iron deficiency is fatigue, and sometimes they can overlap, particularly because of certain reasons. We may not particularly like to have maybe red meats, for example. We could check this by having a blood test, and usually we find it's a little bit lower. We'll see what we could do with maybe having a little bit more of the red meats or having a little bit more iron in the diet. And sometimes we may or may not need some supplementation just to get it up there and then maintain it with diet afterwards.
Yeah, great. And I think then, so how could we start to make healthy choices if we do have limited energy and limited time?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and something that we all can relate to. I think in terms of planning healthy meals, if we think simple and think something along the lines of a plate model, which looks a little bit like this. I'll take a
A
picture
little
of it
bit,
towards
yeah,
the end and post it
yeah,
back
we'll post
up.
it up.
But the general gist of it, it looks a little bit like the size of a dinner plate. Half the plate we're looking at is veggies. The quarter of it we're looking is some sort of protein, and then the last quarter of it we're looking at some sort of carbohydrates on the plate. And then once we know the different components that we want on the plate, we think about, okay, for each of the components, what are some easy things we can do? So one of the components is we want to aim for half a plate of some sort of vegetables and salad. So some simple options can include doing things like prepared and washed salad packs that we can get from the supermarket. We can also get things like pre-chopped vegetable packs in the supermarket as well. Or if you've got a bit of time, say in the weekend compared to the weekdays, we might even buy some of the veggies, have it pre-washed, pre-chopped and ready to go in the fridge. Other things that are available are we do get frozen vegetables. We can easily microwave them as well. A lot in the frozen section, there's a lot of the steam fresh packs. We can do things like tin veggies as well. Um, the next component that's on our plate is having a quarter of a plate of some sort of protein. So with this, we can think about, okay, there's a lot of tinned meats, legumes, lentils, which you can buy from the shelf. We can get those steam fresh packs of the meats as well, particularly in the fish. They're in the frozen section as well, and they're easily quite microwavable. Sometimes we can go with leftovers, so we've cooked extras. We can definitely have it for lunch the next day. Is also another idea we can do. Things like nuts and seeds. We can even do things like nut paste on bread, for example, is also another way we can actually get some sort of protein into our diet. Um, the third component is basically having a quarter of your plate, having a little bit of low GI carbohydrates as well. And these days, we've got a lot of microwavable rice in the supermarket section. We've got things like bread rolls, wraps, which are quite easily able to get from things like bakeries as well. Other ideas that we can do for more, I suppose, whole meal options are there can be sort of shelf refrigeration options that's in the supermarket. So a common one where we might find is are things like soups. There are foods on the shelf. There are convenience meals in the fridge and frozen section. And the last thing is we can get meal delivery companies to assist as well. With these meals, sometimes we might find there might be missing certain components. So, for example, if we go for a pasta dish, we might get the pasta component. So we've got the carbohydrates. We might have the meat component, but sometimes they might be missing the veggies. In which case, okay, what we can do is we can either do a pre-prepared salad on the side, or we might even get one of the frozen microwavable veggies and mix it in with our pasta. So there's a little bit of mix and match involved as well. So a couple of ideas there.
Yeah,
Hopefully
that's
that makes things
great.
a bit easier. Yeah.
Thanks, Jady. So the next one's about omega-3. So we understand that eating omega-3, it is an anti-inflammatory and it can be useful with MS. So what foods can we eat that is rich in omega-3?
Yeah, good question. So, some foods might include things like gum nuts and seeds. Fish will be also another example. Some of the fats and oils, particularly the plant-based ones, so things like avocado, canola oils. There are eggs which are omega-3 enriched as well. So, and there are things like whole grains, breads and cereals. Sometimes you might see they're fortified with omega-3, and they're usually in the nutritional panel. And one of the interesting things that we notice from this is this recommendation basically follows what's in the Australian Dietary Guidelines as well in terms of having these foods.
Yeah, yeah. And another one as well that I think can get brought up, it's been in the news a bit about the gut microbiome. So, and then there seems to be some research which would encourage people with MS to improve their gut microbiome. So how do listeners do that, or what should they eat for that?
Yeah. So at the moment, the best way to achieve the healthy gut microbiome is actually to follow the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So it makes things easy. Having plant-based foods such as things like your fruit, your vegetables, things like the whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds. So what you'll notice, some of these overlap with some of the things that we've previously said as well. And the good thing about these foods is they contain nutrients for the microbiota, which is the bacteria that's in our gut. They love feeding on things like the dietary fiber, the polyphenols, and also the omega-3 fatty acids. And what we've also found is regularly having foods which might be high in saturated fat, salt, and sugar also appear to have a negative effect on it. So the bacteria in our gut don't particularly like this. So essentially, we can't go wrong with having the foods from our 5 food groups.
Yeah, nice. Lovely. And how about supplements? Do you recommend taking supplements?
Yeah. So it really depends on the situation. I think generally speaking, if we are able to get all the nutrients from our diet, that's probably the best way to go, because not a single food will contain lots of different nutrients that it's very hard to be replicated with a supplement. Usually, the supplement might contain maybe one or two, and things sort of work a little bit differently with absorption when we have things through food as well. There are sort of exceptions when we do recommend supplements, and some of these might be, for example, when we might be diagnosed with a deficiency, and it's really hard for us to actually get it back up with the food because we have increased needs, and that's when things like supplementation might come into play. So example might of this might be, for example, we don't particularly like red meat, or for social ethical reasons, we might not choose to have any. So we might find it hard to get the iron, and therefore maybe an iron supplementation might be needed. The other situation might be, for example, we might have certain situations where we might have poor appetite, or we might have increased needs, for example, in pregnancy, or if you've had a surgery where we actually have high requirements and it's hard to get through food, then that's when supplementation might come in as well. There is sort of some research at the moment in terms of the high dose biotin, where they might have some sort of promising results that it might benefit people with MS in terms of management of some of the symptoms. But that's sort of emerging at the moment, and we tend to do it with, I suppose, a bit of medical supervision when that happens. Yeah, but generally speaking, if everything's all good, then ideally we try to get everything throughout our diet.
Great. So I guess now might be a good opportunity. Did you want to tell everyone a little bit
Yep.
more about the MS dietitian service that you've been running?
Yeah, yeah. So it's really exciting, and I'm glad a lot of people might potentially be interested in this particular service. So we've opened up the dietitian service for people with MS, hopefully to support your health and well-being, hopefully to manage symptoms, and also any sort of lifestyle questions you might have. So the MS dietitian service can be funded through the NDIS plan, or it can be done privately. Other ways to access a little bit of the diet information is we do have things like the Facebook Live going on. We also have, I suppose, presentations every now and again where this information we try to give it accessible to everyone. So it is a one-on-one session. Hopefully at the end of the session, we come up with a bit of a personalized plan to actually suit your goals, suit your lifestyle, suit what you were hoping to get out of the session, and also to support you with any questions you might ask. There's no judgment. Every question is a good question, and also empower you and hopefully motivate you to be able to, have the skills to plan and prepare meals. And this might be from providing ideas and recipes, could be shopping lists, could be takeaway, could be using the diet to manage medical conditions, and also so much more. At the moment, the service is operating fortnightly Thursdays. It can be done face to face, based at Lidcombe, or it can be done through telehealth as well. So if anyone's interested in more information, feel free to contact MS Connect, and we'll be basically able to connect you through to the service.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Jady. That was a
Thank you.
great lot of information there. So as Jady just said, if you have any questions, please send them through and we'll make sure we get back to you. And as well as Jady mentioned, MS Connect, and that's for any dietitian referrals, or if you have any further questions, please get in contact. But thanks so much for your time, Jady.
Thank you.
See you later.
Yep. See you.